The barn door creaked like something alive. Dust rolled low across the sawdust floor, thick as smoke, catching the yellow light that leaked through the cracks in the walls. The smell of sweat, horses, and fear filled the air. Outside, the summer sun baked the roof, but inside it felt cold, like the air had forgotten how to move. A crowd of men stood shoulder to shoulder, hats low, boots scraping the dirt. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Every man there knew what was about to happen. At the center of the barn, on a raised wooden platform, stood a girl. Her name was Alora Calloway. She was only 19 but looked older, worn down by too many hard years, and too many nights she wished would end faster. The dress she wore had once been her mother's. It hung loose now, yellowed at the collar, seams frayed from years of washing by hand. Her bonnet shaded most of her face, but not enough to hide the purple bruise blooming along her jaw. She didn't cry, she didn't plead. She just stood there, still and quiet, like she'd already left her body somewhere else. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the heat like a whip. "Unclaimed bride's final call," he shouted, stepping up beside her. His coat was shiny with sweat, his grin thin as a knife. "Virgin stock!" Untouched. Starting at 3 silver, a low murmur swept through the crowd. Boots shifted, spurs clicked. The air thickened with hunger, greed, and something darker. No one spoke at first. Then, from the far back of the barn, a voice came steady and low. 3. The room went silent. Every head turned. A tall man stepped out of the shadows. His long coat was dust-covered, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't leer. He just walked forward, his boots slow against the wooden floor. When he reached the platform, he dropped 3 silver coins into the auctioneer's palm. "I claim nothing," he said. The words hung heavy in the still air. The auctioneer froze, unsure if it was a joke. The crowd shifted uneasily. Then the cowboy, Cole Jarrett, they called him, stepped up beside the girl and did something no one expected. He dropped to one knee in the dirt before her. The barn went quiet. Even the horses stopped moving. Alora's breath caught. She looked down at him, confused, frightened. Cole untied the cracked leather straps of her boots, lifted them gently, and set them beside her bare feet. His hands were rough but steady, careful like a man handling something sacred. "You don't belong to them," he said quietly, his voice carrying in the stillness. "And you don't belong to me. I just bought your silence from monsters." Alora's knees trembled. She didn't understand. Not yet, but something inside her stirred. Something small and fragile that had been buried a long time ago. Cole stood, took off his long coat, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're free to walk out that door," he said simply. Then he turned and started toward the barn doors. No one tried to stop him. Not a word was spoken. For a long moment, Alora stood frozen. Then she stepped down from the platform and followed him. Not because he asked, but because, for the first time in her life, someone hadn't told her what to do. Outside, the air felt different. Cooler. The sky was streaked with orange as the sun dipped low behind the ridge. A wagon waited near the fence. Cole climbed up onto the driver's bench and took the reins. He didn't look back, but his voice came calm. "You coming?" Alora hesitated. She glanced at the barn, at the faces still staring through the open door. Then, she climbed onto the wagon beside him. The wheels creaked as they rolled forward. The sound of the horses' hooves steady against the dirt road. They rode in silence for a long time, the plains stretching empty around them. Far off, thunder rumbled in the mountains. The sound made Alora flinch. Cole slowed the horses without a word. The silence between them wasn't sharp. It was soft. Safe. After a while, he said, "There's a cabin ahead. You can rest there if you like." The wagon turned off the road and followed a narrow path through a stand of pines. When they stopped, a small cabin stood waiting. Smoke drifted from the chimney, warm light glowing from inside. Cole climbed down and opened the door. "It's warm," he said. "You don't have to go in unless you want to." Alora stood still for a moment, staring at the doorway. Then she stepped inside. The fire burned steady in the hearth. The air smelled of pine smoke and bread. He poured hot water from a kettle into a tin cup and set it on the table. "There's stew if you're hungry." A blanket by the chair. She didn't move. Her hands clutched his coat tight around her shoulders. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked at her, calm and quiet. "Because this is a place with no locks," quote. She stared at him, unsure what that meant. He sat at the table, tore a piece of bread, and set it near her. No demand, no stare, just simple kindness. Alora stepped forward, slowly, and took it. The first bite burned her tongue, but she didn't stop. It tasted like something real. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Cole Jarrett," he said. Alora. He nodded. "Good name." The firelight flickered over their faces. When the night deepened, Cole laid a second blanket near the hearth. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll stay here." She shook her head. "I don't want to be touched." He nodded once. "Then I won't touch what isn't offered." For the first time in years, her shoulders eased. Her breath came slow. She lay down near the fire, the blanket warm against her skin. Outside, wind moved through the pines. That night, for the first time since her mother died, Alora slept without fear. And, as the fire burned low, Cole Jarrett sat quietly in the chair, eyes on the flames. He had bought her for 3 silver coins, not to own her, but to save her. Neither of them knew it yet, but this night would change everything. Morning sunlight slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, turning the air gold. Alora woke slowly, the warmth of the fire still touching her face. For a moment, she forgot where she was. There was no shouting, no doors slamming, no harsh voices. Just quiet. The kind that felt almost too gentle to trust. The smell of coffee drifted through the room. Cole stood by the stove, his sleeves rolled up, turning a skillet of eggs. He didn't look at her right away. He just poured a cup and set it on the table. "Morning," he said simply. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter. "Morning." "Eat," he said. "You'll need strength if you plan to keep walking." She frowned. "Where would I go?" "That's for you to decide," he said, sitting down across from her. "You're not trapped here." She looked around the cabin, the bed neatly made, the tools hanging on the wall, the fire steady in the hearth. It wasn't much, but it felt like the safest place she'd ever seen. She took the cup, sipped the coffee. It was bitter, but warm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Treating me like I matter." He met her eyes and didn't look away. "Because you do." The words hit her like a small storm. She turned her face toward the fire, pretending to warm her hands. No one had ever said something like that to her without expecting something back. After breakfast, Cole went outside to mend a loose shutter. Laura followed, standing quietly on the porch. The air smelled of pine and smoke. She watched him work, steady and sure. His movements were patient, no rush, no anger. He looked toward her after a while. "You used to live near the river, didn't you?" She blinked. "How'd you know?" "Your hands." He said. "They've known work. And your voice, it carries soft, like folks from the lowlands." She smiled a little, almost shy. "I used to help my mother in the fields before she passed." He nodded. No pity, no questions. Just a quiet understanding that made her chest ache. Later that day, he came inside carrying a folded dress. "It was my sister's," he said, placing it gently on the chair. "You can wear it if you want." No rush, Alora touched the fabric. It was soft, smelled faintly of soap. It wasn't new, but it was cared for. She ran her thumb along the seams and felt something she hadn't in years, kindness that didn't hurt. That night, she watched him sit by the fire, carving a small block of wood with a knife. The steady scrape of the blade against the grain filled the quiet room. "What are you making?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Don't know yet." She walked closer. "My mother used to sew," said. Her hands got lonely when they weren't making something. He smiled faintly. "Mine too." For a long moment, the only sound was the fire popping. Then Alora's voice came soft. "Will you braid my hair?" He paused, surprised, then nodded. "If you want." She sat down near the fire. His hands were careful as they moved through her hair, untangling each strand without pulling. It felt strange, safe, almost holy. "No one ever touched me without wanting something," she whispered. "I'm not no one," he said. When he finished, he tied the braid with a strip of soft leather. She turned to face him. "Why did you kneel in that barn?" He met her eyes. "Because everyone else stood over you. Someone needed to meet you eye to eye." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her that way, like she was more than something to be sold or owned. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "Neither are you," he replied. They sat there for a while, sharing the same quiet space. The firelight danced between them. "Do I owe you anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "Number. But you own everything that happens next." Quote. The words stayed in her mind long after he turned back to the fire. That night, when he laid out the blanket near the hearth again, she didn't argue. But this time, she chose the bed because she could. Cole didn't say a word. He just smiled faintly and stirred the fire. By morning, snow clouds gathered low over the hills. The air smelled sharp and clean. Alora woke to the sound of Cole chopping wood outside. She dressed in the borrowed dress and stepped out into the cold. He looked up when he saw her, breath fogging in the air. "I want to help," she said. He nodded and handed her a smaller axe. She tried to split a log, but the blade missed and hit the dirt. The sound rang out, sharp. "You don't have to be perfect," he said gently. "Just honest." She tried again. This time the wood cracked clean in half. A small smile crept across her face. "They always said I was weak," she said. "Too soft. Too small." "They lied," he answered. "You're not broken, you were bought." "That's not the same thing." She swallowed hard. His words burned, but not like pain, like truth. By noon, the woodpile was stacked high. She leaned on the axe, catching her breath. "What do you want from me, Cole?" Quote. He set down his own axe, looked at her with calm eyes. Quiet mornings. Someone to share coffee with. Someone who doesn't flinch when I move. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "That's all." "That's everything," he said. Inside, the fire burned warm again. She peeled potatoes while he sharpened his knife. The quiet between them felt easy now. After a while, she asked, "Why me?" He stopped carving because you still had fight in your eyes. She looked down at the table, her throat tight. "You braid my hair," she whispered. "But you don't touch me." He nodded. "That's the kind of touch that matters. The one that waits." She looked at him through the firelight. "How long will you wait?" "As long as it takes for you to stop asking why someone can be kind without a cost." Her tears came then. For the first time in her life, they felt clean, like rain after drought. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something fragile and new had begun to grow. The snow melted by the third morning. The hills looked washed clean, the sky pale and soft. The smell of wet pine drifted through the open door as Alora stood on the porch, her braid loose down her back. The fear that used to live in her chest felt smaller now, quieter, like a caged bird finally learning it could rest. Cole was by the woodpile, swinging his axe in steady rhythm. Each crack of the blade echoed through the valley, calm and sure. When he looked up and saw her, the faintest smile touched his mouth. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She stepped down from the porch, picked up a small log, and set it on the chopping block. He handed her the axe. Her hands were still tender, but she swung hard. The log split clean. "You're getting better," he said. "I'm getting free," she answered. He nodded once and turned back to work. The sound of their axes filled the air, mixing with the soft hiss of melting snow. From inside the cabin came the light laughter of a child. Caleb, Cole's nephew, barely 6 years old, had been living with them for weeks now. The boy had lost his parents to a storm the winter before, and Cole had taken him in without question. Alora hadn't meant to love the child, but she did. His small hands, his crooked grin, they had found a place in her heart she thought was gone. She wiped her hands on her skirt and went inside. Caleb sat at the table, drawing in the dust with a stick of charcoal. "Morning, Caleb," she said. He looked up, grinning, 2 front teeth missing. "Morning," Miss Alora." She poured him milk from the jug and set it down in front of him. Watching him made her chest ache in a good way. The kind of ache that comes from seeing something whole after living too long with broken things. Cole came in, brushing snow from his boots. "We'll ride into town this afternoon," he said. "Need to trade for seed before the ground thaws." Alora nodded. "I'll pack food for the road." When he stepped outside again, she looked around the cabin. The table clean. The bed neatly made. The hearth glowing steady. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Later that morning, while putting dishes away, she found a small wooden box tucked on the shelf. She lifted the lid carefully. Inside was the leather braid he had tied from her hair weeks ago. She had given it to him without thinking back then, not knowing what it meant. Now she ran her fingers over it, feeling the smooth strip. "You kept it," she said when he came back inside. He nodded. "It reminded me what choice looks like." She smiled softly and placed it back inside. "Keep it if you want. But I don't need it anymore." Quote. He looked at her, a long, quiet look that said more than words ever could. It's safe either way. That evening after supper, she stepped outside carrying her old auction dress. She had washed it until every stain was gone. The fabric was soft again, but it didn't belong to her anymore. In the patch of earth behind the cabin, she knelt and dug a small hole with her bare hands. The ground was cold and damp, but she didn't stop. She placed the dress inside, pressed the dirt flat with her palms, and stood. Her fingers trembled, but her heart didn't. "You don't own me anymore," she whispered. When she came back inside, Cole sat by the fire carving a bird out of pine wood. He didn't ask where she had been. He didn't need to. She watched the curve of his hands as he worked, steady and patient. "You made this?" she asked when he handed it to her for Caleb. He said something to hold when the storms come back. She turned the little carving in her hands, tracing its smooth wings. Then she looked up at him. "I'm not staying because I owe you." He set down his knife. "I know. I'm staying because I like who I am here." A quiet smile touched his face. "That's what I hoped." The firelight flickered between them. She sat beside him instead of across from him this time. Her hand brushed his as she passed the wooden bird back. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The world outside the window was still and white. "Do you still want to ask me proper one day?" she whispered. He looked down at her, his voice low and rough. "Only if you ever want to be asked." She reached for his hand and placed it over her heart. "This is me saying yes," she said quietly. "Not because you bought me, because I choose to." He didn't answer with words. He just held her hand like it was something sacred. The next morning, the sun rose clear over the ridge. Caleb's laughter filled the yard as Cole pulled him across the snow on a small sled made from scrap wood. The sound carried through the trees, bright and wild. Laura stood on the porch, arms crossed, smiling through the chill. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stood tall, sunlight glinting on her braid. She was no longer the girl sold for 3 silver coins. No longer the frightened soul who waited for doors to slam. She was something new, someone unclaimed, someone free, someone loved without price. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady, warm as a promise. She stepped through the doorway and let the heat wrap around her. This time, it didn't feel like borrowed warmth. It felt like home.